We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Immigrants in Sweden, many of them Muslims, writing for several nights, saying they feel excluded from society. Voices are quickly heard calling for more restrictions on immigration. In the UK, a Muslim convert kills a British soldier on a London street. It is quickly followed by several attacks on mosques. When events such as these take place and tensions rise, is there anyone around who speaks on behalf of all Muslims? Yes, this man says he is. Ekmelettin Ihsanoglu is the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Headquartered in Saudi Arabia, it is funded by Islamic nations across the world. The OIC has ramped up its public relations efforts in the last year or so, often issuing press releases when violent events take place. It condemned the recent attack on the French embassy in Tripoli. It called for the release of abducted Christian archbishops in Syria. And after the attack at the Boston Marathon, Ihsanoglu expressed, quote, satisfaction when the police apprehended the suspect. But he also urged the US authorities to ensure the safety of Muslims from being targeted in response. Skeptics of the OIC say the organization is merely a vehicle for empty meetings and rhetoric, but the organization has had some notable successes. It managed to push through a UN human rights resolution against religious discrimination, and it found a helpful partner in this job, Hillary Clinton, when she was US Secretary of State. For the OIC's Secretary General, a man with personal roots in Turkey, his number one job right now is combating what he calls Islamophobia in the West. So we sit down with him to discuss all the hot topics: discrimination, freedom of expression, and religious persecution, here on Talk to Al Jazeera.
So Ihsanoglu, thank you very much for joining us on Talk to Al Jazeera. Delighted to be able to speak to you. Can you tell us, to start this off, what OIC actually stands for, what your aim is?
Well, OIC stands for being the only and sole representative, official representative of the Muslim world. 1.5 billion people, 1/5 of the mankind. It has been a great experience to go through all these years to achieve this objective, and also to transform OIC to be the real spokesman of the Muslim world for a better understanding, better cooperation with the rest of the world.
Does that suggest that there's some sort of growing gulf between the Muslim world and the rest of the world?
On the contrary, this is what we're trying, that to bridge the gap, to build better understanding, to foster better cooperation, and engage with the rest of the world.
I should imagine that for your job to be successful, there has to be compromise from both the Muslim world and the rest of the world.
Well, we can put it this way, that we had to understand each other better, because the world belongs to all of us. It's not only that the Muslims are on this planet, or the Westerns, or the others. What we managed to do until recently, that we opened channels of communication with the United States, European Union, many European countries, with Russia, with China. So we have opened these channels, and I think we managed to build a better understanding between the Muslim world as a whole, between OIC as a representative of the 57 countries, 1 billion Muslims, or 1 billion people of the member countries, and half a billion of Muslim minorities all over the world.
If I can put it quite basically, when you talk about opening channels, are you talking about countries that issue drone strikes to the man, woman on the street who might persecute Muslims?
Well, of course, we are dealing with all of these things, but there are different ways of doing that. There are quite diplomacy, there are official démarches, there are meetings, there are resolutions by ministers, ministerial council, by summit. But I have to tell you that one of our achievements, which we'll feel very proud of, the establishment of Human Rights Permanent Commission in the OIC. This Human Rights Commission is mandated to promote the better understanding of human rights, to advocate human rights, and to defend human rights in our countries and outside. So, and we consider this also as a conduit for better understanding, better communication between the Muslim world and the rest.
You talk a lot about Islamophobia. What is it that you mean? What is your definition of that?
Well, Islamophobia means really misunderstanding, mispresentation, and mismanagement or misdealing with the Muslims in a predominantly non-Muslim country, and disguising Islam. It goes from misuse of freedom of expression by denigrating, by vilifying others, by defaming religions and discriminating against Muslims. It takes the shape of discretion of even the tombstones. You see, it goes to that extent. It takes the shape of writing a book insulting the Muslims, the Prophet, vilifying them. It takes the shape of making use of xenophobic, anti-Islamic rhetoric to win the votes of radical groups like the fascist, Nazist young people. It takes the shape of discrimination against immigrants in the name of economic reasons or social reasons. It takes many shapes.
You touched on many issues there, and I'd like to work my way through them, but I'm just going to put something to you. This is a dialogue between some artists, some, they call themselves atheists, some new thinkers, Sam Harris being one of them. He says, Islamophobia is a fictitious and non-existent. It's a term of propaganda designed to protect Islam from the forces of secularism by conflating all criticism of it with racism and xenophobia.
Well, that is again another good example of the portraying the problems of the Muslims in the West as if they are the aggressors. You see here in this statement, it shows that the Muslims are the aggressors, and this gentleman and many others they have to defend Western values against Islam. And this is again one of the manifestation of Islamophobia. Let me say
but
that
sometimes the Muslims are the aggressors, aren't they? I mean, we're seeing an increase in attacks on Buddhist shrines. We're seeing an increase on attacks on Christian churches. So there is a case when this can be true.
Well, that happens, but let me explain first this. When you have this event in Norway, you had a young man who went to kill his own people because they belonged to a different political party who he thought giving room and window or opportunity to Muslim immigrants. And they killed them, so at more than 70 people out of them. So it is not the Muslims who are killing the Europeans or the Norwegians, or it is not the Muslims who are attacking the Western countries. When you take the Geert Wilders book and his propaganda in Holland, and how he used this xenophobic rhetoric to win the votes of people, and he managed to increase his numbers of parliament seats and then become a coalition partner. Now he lost because people found that this Islamophobic rhetoric is meaningless. And in 2010, I have proposed in my speech in Human Rights Council an 8-point plan to cooperate on discrimination against religious beliefs, denigration, stereotyping, and to defend freedom of religion. And these 8 points were unanimously accepted by the United States, by European Union, European countries, and since 2011 we have been cooperating in the United Nations General Assembly and Human Rights Council, and unanimously we are adopting the same principles.
But aren't you
So
already...
we have now changed our position, and Europe and the United States changed their position from confrontation to cooperation, and we are happy with this.
But aren't you already preaching to the converted? For example, in Saudi Arabia, there is no acceptance of religious minorities. There is no acceptance of freedom of expression. There's no acceptance of freedom of expression in many Muslim countries.
Well, I wouldn't say in many Muslim countries. I come from a country where the Jews were given asylum when they were denied living in their own country in one of European countries.
But I'm talking about cartoons.
You remember
I mean,
when
you
the
yourself
when
jumping
the
in here.
Inquisition courts pressured, compelled Muslims and Jews after the Reconquista to either change and convert to Christianity or they lose their life. They fled to Turkey. And the Ottoman Armada brought them and settled them in Istanbul, in Izmir, Salonika.
I'm talking about the countries where it is still an issue, like
Well,
Saudi
there
Arabia,
are
for
certain
example.
countries where problems, of course.
So
but
are you preaching the same kind of understanding to countries like...
This is not the norm. This is the exception. And we are not defending these exceptions. We are defending. We consider that the practice and the norm, when you look to
But how can you call for acceptance, for example, Saudi Arabians call for acceptance when there is no acceptance here? I mean, that is a form of hypocrisy which people don't understand.
Well, I think all countries who signed and agreed and voted for that, they are eligible to implement that. We are not a monitoring agency that we say country A has implemented this or country B has not implemented it. This is why we have asked the Human Rights Council in Geneva to have observatories to monitor violation of this resolution, which we call 1618, which agreed consensually by Muslim countries, Europeans and Americans, to monitor acts related to Islamophobia, to Christianophobia, and anti-Semitism.
You say that there should be some sort of retribution, maybe is too strong a word, if a country doesn't comply. What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, let's say that in the international law, you cannot force people unless they are part of certain conventions. So related to the freedom of religion, there is no international convention that's signed and agreed and ratified by everybody. But there are resolutions which we are part of. We promoted these resolutions, and we expect everybody to respect them.
You talk about freedom of expression, and let's talk about cartoons. I know you're very worried about a comic book on the life of the Prophet. You have said, these are your words, that this is tantamount to another instance of abuse of freedom of expression. But freedom of expression is just that, freedom of expression.
No. Every freedom exercising freedom goes with responsibility. There is no absolute freedom. And this is not a philosophical statement. This is a legal statement.
But it's fine to criticize one religion but not another.
No,
is that
no,
acceptable?
no. It's not that you criticize or not criticize. You can criticize, and you are free to criticize.
No, but you're not free to criticize, because if there is criticism
but to
or
criticize,
satirical
not
comments on a religion,
or to show
it
the
incites
prophet of
anger.
1 billion and a half, 1,500 people believe in a prophet and revere him. You show him as a terrorist with a bomb on his turban. This is not a freedom. This is abuse of freedom. And this is where the International Convention on Civil Rights and Human Rights in Article 19 and Article 20 put a limit on exercising freedom, that when you exercise your freedom, you have to do it with responsibility and not to instigate hatred and violence.
Aren't you instigating debate? Isn't it healthy to debate? And if you can't debate issues and sensitivities concerning religions and other topics, how do you ever reach some kind of happy resolution?
No, you should not reach happy resolution, and you should not stop criticizing or debating. We are for discussion, we are for criticism, and we have no problem with that. The problem starts when you abuse your freedom to insult others, and you use it as an instrument of hate speech.
Okay, let's talk about the West and another quote that you made, and I just want you to talk me through it. You say, Western leaders need to recognize that Islamophobia is a threat to peaceful coexistence and understanding among people. I mean, if it is that bad, then why are you seeing so many people moving over, Muslims moving to Europe, moving to the USA?
Well, I think what we need is to understand this phenomena. This phenomena has been created by a small, radical, vocal group. And our problem in the two worlds, in the Western world and in the Muslim world, these small, radical, marginal, but very vocal, active groups. As I've been saying all through and time and again, that we should not be captives or hostages of our radicals. I will give an example. Take the film Innocence of Islam or Muslims, and the reaction happened to it. It was portrayed as an American film, and the reaction was against America. The film was not an American film. It has nothing to do with American administration. It has not to do with American film industry. It has to do with some misguided, ill-intentioned people who had hatred against Islam and made a small thing which is full of hatred. And then it was received by people who didn't know about the film. Some of them haven't seen the film itself, millions of them. And then they went to attack the embassy in Cairo, and then in the same time, terrorists killed the ambassador in Libya. And the whole mishmash happened because of small radical group on this side and small radical group side exactly retaliated to each other in the way both sides wanted to do. This is what we are saying. We are respecting human rights, we are respecting freedom of expression, but we are inviting people to civilized dialogue and to respect each other. And I think this has happened.
It's the man and the woman on the ground who might feel frightened. They might feel frightened what Islam for them represents. Many of them, it could be a lack of education, it could be a lack of travel, it could be a horrific experience. Associate Islam and Muslims to, obviously, 9/11, to, for example, the imam here who raped and tortured and murdered his 5-year-old child, and then he gets let off. The message is often a bit skewed. Many of them are frightened when Muslims might be coming into their country that this is going to change their way.
This is true.
Should
And
they
here
be
I think
frightened?
You are exact. I completely agree with you. And this is where we need two things. We need to educate people. We have to enlighten people about these acts of marginal people, the ones you mentioned, and the ones I mentioned about desecration, even of tombs of French soldiers who died for the French Empire in the First World War. People will go and desecrate their tombs, and even the died people, they are not immune from the Islamophobic acts. And then you have the Norway event of massacre of 70 people, more than 70 people, by a Norwegian fanatic. We have to tell people that this is marginal groups, this is radical people, this is not mainstream Islam, or this is not mainstream West, this is not Western culture, this is not European values, this is not Islamic values, this is ill-minded people, bad intention, radical people who are creating this problem on this side or the other side. We have to tell them. And I think media need to focus more on the main message, on the mainstream, and then to build, to help building.
Isn't assimilation the message, though? I mean, if you have two different societies, or so many different societies trying to coexist, they need to try and assimilate in each other's culture, be a little bit more forgiving, maybe.
It's true, but I'm saying how to do that. We need two things. We need media to throw more light on the common values, on the main values. Secondly, we need education to tell people that we all belong to the same human civilization, and what the civilization of today is a shared civilization built by all nations, not only one nation or one part of the world.
You talk about forgiveness and freedom of expression limited.
Not limited. No, not limited.
Okay, well,
No,
I mean, without having devastating.
No, not limited. With dignity.
With dignity. Okay, I got that. So we've discussed Islamophobia, what some people are saying are Christianophobia at the moment. What about homophobia within the...
What do you mean by that?
What I mean about homophobia?
Yes.
Well, the fear and the persecution of homosexuals. There are Muslim homosexuals. Many of them have to leave their countries to practice their freedoms. Where does that fall in the picture of human rights that you talk about?
Well, I think this is a very special group. This is
people, humans, you say we're all from the same planet?
Yeah, well, I think here we have a problem because that goes with the, this is not a universal issue. You see, in the West also, the religious institutions, Vatican and churches, they have their own reservation on this. In the Muslim world also, though OIC is not a religious institution, but I think in our societies when religious feelings are stronger compared to the West, when religion has more impact on societies, this issue becomes very thorny and very problematic. So
is it difficult to balance religious and social issues? Is that the challenge in the Muslim world?
Well, maybe this is a challenge, but now the biggest challenge in the Muslim world is the how to adjust the relation between political sphere and religious sphere, particularly with the advent of the uprisings and the coming of Islamic movements to the power, to the helm of power. The main problem now is how to organize the relation between religion and politics, how to balance the relation, how not to allow one sphere to dominate on the other, not to allow politics to dominate religion as it was the case in the dictatorial regime, or to make religion dominates politics as the certain trends now and currents in the part of the Muslim world.
Relations between the Muslim world and the Catholic Church really hit a low under the previous Pope. Do you see things getting better now with the advent of Pope Francis?
Well, I think His Holiness the Pope Francis has started with a good note. And we understand from his career in his own home country in Argentina that his relationship with Muslim communities were very good and he was appreciated by them. And also I mentioned to him that I have been advocating historical reconciliation between Islam and Christianity. In 1960s, Vatican has initiated historical reconciliation between Christianity and Judaism. And I think that example is a very good example for how peaceful, lasting relationship could be established by major religions. We are three of us represent the Abrahamic tradition, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And since reconciliation between Christianity and Judaism has been established, we should really work for establishing reconciliation, historic reconciliation between Christianity and Islam. I have been advocating this idea for last 7-8 years. I have mentioned this in my letter to His Holiness the Pope, and I'm waiting to hear from him.
You are apparently going to be stepping down next year. If you had to look at your legacy, what you've achieved, what would it be?
I would particularly be happy to note that and to be associated with incorporating universal values of human rights, of democracy, good governance, freedom, expression, freedom of everything, and with empowerment of women, promotion of science and technology, and many other universal values, incorporating these values in our charter, in our 10-year program of action, in our constitutional documents. I can say that it will be a different legacy than the one I inherited in 2005.
And thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.